My second point is, will employers have their employment regulations audited for inclusive policies? Because it irritates me as a primary carer that I know lots and lots of people with disabilities. They can't get the jobs because there's some quirk in an employer's regulations that says must be multi-skilled. Well, that's an exclusive state, and it's excluding lots and lots of people from the employment field, and I think that's really unethical and rather wicked.
Okay, thanks, Lynn. I just might ask one of the commissioners to address this question of how the scheme will relate to other parts of society and the economy, because there are some comments in the report about MOUs and the role that the agency might play in making our community more accessible to people with disabilities. John or Patricia, who would like to go?
I'll have a go, Bruce. Patricia might want to expand on it. To answer the guts of your question, the intention of the NDIS is that people would have choice where they live and would have control over the allocation of their individual funding package. The NDIA would not necessarily have direct control over the accessibility of building standards, nor of employment rules and regulations for employers. The point Bruce makes is that there's a recommendation, not a recommendation, an understanding in the report that the NDIA would work strongly with other sectors, mainstream sectors of public health, public housing, public education, public transport, and by implication, I think, the employment sector, to encourage those sectors to fulfil their obligations and their need to contribute to the Tier 2 needs of people with a disability. So the NDIA, I would envisage, would be an active advocate for the states and territories and industry to make a contribution to those issues of accessibility.
Bruce, I will take the opportunity to say an extra few words. I was amazed, because I don't have a lived experience with disability. I was amazed that in this day and age, people still had to go out to Lions clubs, Rotary clubs, Probus clubs to get basic supports like a basic wheelchair, that allied health professionals were spending half of their week organising charity dues so that they could get basic therapies paid for, that parents and grandparents were given $5,000 packages but told to go out and fund $12,000 out of their own charity. I think there's an awful lot that the community sector could be usefully engaged in terms of community participation and employment. Wouldn't it be great to be able to think that the Lions, Rotary, Probus and so on had an employment perspective rather than a basic charity perspective that it is currently, unfortunately, their focus, because this is not core government business at the present.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks, Patricia. I'd just now like to take the question on the far right. I think the microphone's over there. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Deborah Byrne. I'm the Executive Officer of the Brain Injury Association of Tasmania and also on the board of Brain Injury Australia. My understanding is that one of the goals is to reduce discrimination and also to meet reasonable needs. So I apologise if I may have misunderstood the report, but I wonder if Patricia could just tell me what the rationale is in terms of eligibility, why a person with intellectual disability is automatically included where a person with another disability isn't. And just to put that in context, you may have a person with a mild to moderate intellectual disability that requires support in daily care and perhaps in meal preparation. You have a person with a mild to moderate acquired brain injury that also needs similar support. The person with intellectual disability, my understanding, automatically, according to the eligibility, would receive that support, yet a person with acquired brain injury perhaps would have to demonstrate that that is reasonable need and prove that that support is going to significantly benefit their life.
I'll have a go and see if John thinks he wants to add something more. Thank you very much for the question. Look, drawing up the eligibility criteria was a very difficult exercise, and we didn't have many models to look at either here or overseas that really we thought met what we were after and what we consider the community's after. I see the distinction you're trying to make between people with acquired brain injuries and people with intellectual disabilities. And one of the messages we've received loud and clear in the submissions is, does my child, does my partner, do I have to go through yet another assessment process? I've been assessed to death. But taxpayers' dollars would be involved, and not everyone in the community is an angel. So the idea that there would need to be some sort of assessment process, that there would need to be a discussion with the individual about what they want to achieve in their life is perfectly reasonable. And the question is then what happens next? If a person has an acquired brain injury, they would meet the category 1 under core limitations of mobility, communications or self-care. We are not envisaging that someone who has an acquired brain injury would and has the same needs as a person with intellectual disabilities would miss out. I expect the processes would be not too dissimilar to each other, but both would require some assessment process. I just don't think we can base everything on conditions, because as you know, two people can have conditions and have radically different needs in the community.
Just add to that, I think another one of the categories under that Tier 3 is the early intervention category, and acquired brain injury is actually mentioned in that category as one of the examples where early intervention may improve the participation potential of someone with a brain injury. To the extent that that person would continue to need reasonable support after that early intervention, that person would certainly be entitled to it.
Okay, the front here, please.
Thank you. Magic Barclay. I'm the mother and carer of 2 children with autism spectrum disorder, wife and carer of a gentleman with autism spectrum disorder, and part-time carer for an elderly mother. Look, my question basically is to the whole panel and to the previous speakers from today. We've heard a lot about disability, and yes, I'm all for anything that can happen for my children, because they will live with their disability for the rest of their lives. But I'm their carer. I can't work full-time. I have no savings. I can't pay my mortgage. What will this scheme do for me? I've got no super left. I've already accessed every cent of it. And I can't even get away for a day to come here. My phone's gone 6 times today from 2 schools that are funded for my children. They see none of that money. What will this do for me?
Thank you, and we've heard similar stories all around Australia, and it's part of the hardship that I mentioned earlier. The idea of the NDIS, I think, is to support people with a disability and their families and carers. Part of the assessment process will also be an assessment of the needs of carers. It's envisaged that the extra funding and hopefully the extra efficiency and community support would of itself alleviate the demands on carers and families' times, and would allow families to become families again. But beyond that, we specifically have recognised that carers need to be acknowledged. Their support needs need to be acknowledged, and that is part of the formal assessment process.
I think, Patricia, you also said this morning in your remarks that you'd heard loud and clear that the needs of carers had been only lightly dealt with in the draft report, and this is an area which you're looking to strengthen and develop further in the final report. So I think we should just take Patricia and John at their word. This is a very important element of this reform. Okay, I'll just take the question on the left, please.
Thank you. My name's Chris Monteagle. I'm a carer and a disability advocate. My question is to Senator McLucas. I think there's a lot of good information and a lot of good news that we've been hearing today around disability and a lot of legitimate concern. The question that I have is that disability is never fashionable and it's never a quick fix, and quite often it doesn't play out very well in the media. And I think a legitimate concern in this room amongst the carers and the people with disabilities is that what assurance do we have that this won't get overshadowed by another trendy or fashionable issue when push comes to shove and we finally have to have a serious debate about this? Disability never polls well in focus groups at election time. So what assurances can you give us that the momentum and that the attention that we're hearing today will carry forth to when it's really important?
Thank you for the question. Look, I think there are a number of reasons why you should feel some comfort that this is an honest attempt by the government to work with the sector to deal with the funding relationship around disability services. We asked the Productivity Commission to undertake this work. They will give us their report in July of this year, and there is a requirement, an obligation, that the government will respond to that report within 25 sitting days of Parliament. That is something that has to happen, so we can't just sort of put it in the inbox and forget about it. But the other power you have in this process is the fact that you've got 1,000 people here today. The fact that there have been stories in the newspapers that I've not seen before. There is a real engagement, I think, by the community, which will grow, and I do encourage you all to make it grow. That will require governments to respond. So I have confidence that there will be, I know there will be a response. I'm confident that will be a genuine response and a genuine discussion that is had in our community around not only disability generally, but the funding of disability services in our country.
Okay. Thanks, Jan. John.
John McKenna, EW Tipping Foundation. Just a query in relation to Mary Woolridge's comments earlier that we spoke about a trial happening in Victoria if things go well. That's great. Do we really need a trial happening in every state, or is there concerns that might even slow things down?
Well, John, this is awkward because John and I haven't discussed this, so I don't know what he's going to say in response to my comments. So here we go. Look, if it meant that genuine reform and a scheme was implemented, I don't think I would be concerned. If it was an excuse to delay, I think I'd be agitating that people just got on with it. Many good features of the Victorian system, many good features of the West Australian system, many good features of the New South Wales system, and I can go through each of the states, are reflected in our proposals. We've effectively picked best of breed in every jurisdiction. Look, reform can take some time, and I have heard some level of scepticism in the audience today about, will this happen? And I could understand why, because if you go through the history, an awful lot has been talked about and not necessarily a lot done. But on the other hand, we probably, I'm 51, actually, 51, yes. And I don't think I would have anticipated that China, communist China, would be the principal financier of America when I was at university.